Can you actually learn the piano from YouTube? So you're curious about learning the piano on YouTube from YouTube tutorials, and you wonder if it's even possible. I'm going to explore all the pros and cons. For those of you that are joining me for the first time, I'm a music teacher by trade. It's my job. I teach the piano and I teach all the brass instruments as well as being a church organist and a piano accompanist and also a Freddie Mercury celebrator. So let's get into this. I suggest that you stay until the end of the video because the opinions I'm about to give you could save you hundreds and hundreds of hours. The rise of online learning. Like many things in the last few years, online resources, particularly with YouTube, have kind of exploded in recent years and provided us the ability to learn about and see so many different things and so many different people from all around the world. Incredible, right? YouTube is free, woohoo! And it's easy to locate what it is that you want to know about or learn about just by a simple search. I mean, I can learn things from how to fix my son's suspension on his bike to following fitness videos and getting advice on nutrition and things like that. Online learning, and in particular YouTube, which is what I'm focusing on today, allows you flexibility. It allows you to work when you want, at whatever pace you want, and for as long as you want. And I guess even when trying to learn a piece of music off YouTube, you could even be kind of watching it and studying it in the middle of the night with headphones on and not really disturbing anybody. But is this enough to make it a useful tool and something that we should choose over traditional options, such as having an actual human teacher? The benefits of YouTube tutorials. So one of the benefits is that you can literally explore any style, any genre, pretty much any piece or song that you want to explore, which is just amazing. And I'll admit myself that there are very few teachers who specialise in every single genre of music or playing an instrument. Jazz improvisation, for example, is a very different set of skills to playing Mozart or to playing Queen. I think to be an expert at every single genre would take so much time, which is why there are so very few people that can do that. So having a grounding in learning how to read music notation has and does allow for you to do is to explore other genres that you might gain an interest in later down the line from where you started. So for example, all I ever learnt and played as a young child was Mozart and Beethoven, and I learnt the traditional way and I learnt how to read music and things like that. But then as I became a teenager, I was introduced to the world of Queen and fell in love straight away, and all I wanted to do was to be able to play Queen. And I'll tell you later why being able to read music enabled me to do that in such a more efficient and enjoyable way. The huge benefit to online learning, as I've said at the beginning, is that it's free. But at what cost? So first of all, we need to think about and look into why do you want to learn the piano? So you have to ask yourself, why do you want to learn to play the piano? Seems quite a silly question actually, that, doesn't it? Surely it's because you want to be able to play a piece of music that you like to listen to, and it'd feel like a sense of achievement to be able to play that, and that you will enjoy doing that. Because the feeling of learning to play a piece of music is both satisfying, it's enjoyable, you can feel as though you've really accomplished something that you haven't been able to do before. It's something that you can share with other people, and one of the biggest gifts of music is being able to give other people joy through the music that you play, and for others to listen to that music and get pleasure from listening to it. And music as well, for me, perhaps one of the biggest reasons as to why I love playing the piano is that it's an incredible way to express your emotions. Now, I would probably say over the years that playing the piano to me has been what has blown up online these days, journaling. You know, it was what I went to whenever I had emotions to deal with or things to let out, rather than doing that on paper or rather than taking that out on people. I would take it out on the piano. I'd either sit there and angrily play some rock music, or I'd play, if I was feeling sad, a beautiful piece of Mozart that helped me release my emotions, and would often be sat there in tears whilst playing it. Not because I was in awe of my own beautiful playing, but because the music that the composer had written, which he had written down so that I could also enjoy in that writing, invoked an emotion in me which enabled me to connect both that music and the emotion at the same time. And it's very much like having your own personal counsellor on 24/7 call. Now guys, I'm not going to sugarcoat things. When I get a new student that comes to me wanting to learn the piano, I often say, you know, have you played the piano before? Have you had lessons before with somebody else? Because they may have moved to a new area or whatever the reason might have been. And often I will get, well, I've been learning off YouTube, and my response is usually, and I won't hide it. And my response is like that, not just because I'm old and I like traditional ways and I'm stuck in my ways and I'm not willing to research and look into new things. I've spent quite a lot of time researching and looking into these kind of newer piano tutorial channels, and I found it really difficult to find one that in effect isn't a paint by numbers situation. So in the same way that doing paint by numbers enables us to basically create a piece of art that, let's be honest, looks pretty good, but I've not gained any skills by doing that. I've not learned how to mix colours or match them side by side, or even experiment to see which two colours work best next to each other in that particular scene or scenario. I've not learned how to do a sunset or shading with pencils or whatever it might be. I've learned absolutely nothing from that other than the satisfaction of, in effect, achieve a glorified colouring book. And it is very satisfying and it's great. But in all honesty, it's not something that I would be proud of. It's something that I would maybe do as a therapeutic tool, but it's not something that I'd put up on the wall and allow anybody else to see. In the same way, finding and learning your favourite piece of music on YouTube basically just spoon feeds you how to actually play that piece of music, but you don't gain any knowledge at all about what it is you're doing, why you're doing it, why you're using your fingers in certain combinations. And if you want to learn a new piece of music because you've really enjoyed having learnt that particular piece of music, you've got to go through this whole process again. What was that? So what if you enjoy it? What does it matter anyway whether you do it paint by number style? Who cares? Do you care? Do I care? Let's think about that. Challenges. Now, I've got to admit, I didn't want to make this video and just completely come up with negative reasons and opinions as to why I don't think online piano tutorials are a great idea. So I have been trying really, really hard to find some positives. Honestly, I really have. Though I've got to admit, I am struggling. But one that popped into my mind recently was that there have been occasions where somebody's come to me and said, can you teach me this particular piece of music? They've got no desire to learn the piano, they don't want lessons, they just want to learn one particular piece of music, and it's always because they want to perform it at an occasion. So perhaps it's a husband-to-be who wants to surprise his new wife at the wedding reception with a piece of being able to play her favourite piece of music or song. Or somebody just wants to learn one for another special occasion, whatever it might be. So this has been relatively common over the years. And in this instance, this is probably the main instance in which I would say piano tutorial is probably going to be your best bet. And if you're not seeking how to actually learn the piano properly and how to actually be able to play it, then the best that I'd be able to do for you in a short-term situation, just to learn one piece of music that is far more advanced than what somebody would be learning first, would probably be to do a similar thing and to record it for them, video my hands so they can follow that. So very similar situation to what you'd find on a YouTube tutorial video. So I think in that instance, I would probably say it might be your best bet. Beyond that, as a teacher, I think it does say something that the amount of people who either inquire about piano lessons or take up piano lessons that are doing so having tried learning the piano on YouTube is very, very high. YouTube as a resource can be useful in so like a hybrid situation. So let me give you a current example. So at the moment, the majority of my students are on an 8-week break. Now the problem with that is, now let's assume that they're practicing regularly when they're not jetting off onto wonderful holidays here, there and everywhere. The problem is it's very difficult to recognise your own mistakes, particularly when you're in that earlier kind of learning and progress place. I'm not saying that I recognise every single one of my own mistakes, not at all, but I recognise when I'm doing all of the basics wrong. And when I get a piece of music to a certain stage, I'll record myself playing it and listen back to it whilst following the music, so I can look into things that I may have missed because I'm focused whilst actually playing the piece myself. And the problem with this is if you spend 8 weeks doing something repetitively wrong, one of the biggest things with playing an instrument is muscle memory. So when you see somebody performing and you're thinking, wow, that looks amazing, that sounds amazing, they're not having to run through in their head all the things that you would be having to think about as a beginner. They're not having to remember how to read the notes or to recognise how long that note lasts, or focusing solely on coordinating two hands doing different things at exactly the same time, or Does this need to be loud? Does this need to be soft, smooth, or bouncy? There's so many things that you have to think about. But when you see a performer, they're not thinking about these things because they have put the hours in, they've done lots of regular practice, and they've all become muscle memory, which is what allows them to transcend above the information that they're reading on the music to make it something of their own, to express their emotion through the music that they're playing. But as I was saying, the issue with doing things wrong, it has the opposite effect from what I've just been talking about, of muscle memory works for incorrect things as well. So 8 weeks worth of drumming mistakes into your fingers and to your muscle memory is going to result in taking probably at least twice that amount of time to correct them. Because every time you go to play that particular passage or whatever it might be, or that particular note that you're playing wrong, everything in your brain and your physiology and your muscle memory is screaming for you to play the wrong note that you've been playing for the last 8 weeks. And you've got to train your brain. It's like learning a new habit. It doesn't just happen overnight. But if you give yourself a bad habit and do that for weeks and weeks, try changing that. So YouTube can be useful in this instance, not so much from the tutorial videos point of view, but there are very few pieces of music that haven't been played or performed on YouTube. Now granted, not all to the standard or the correctness that we might wish and hope for, but it's still pretty good, and it's an excellent tool for somebody to use over an extended period of time without having lessons, to perhaps listen to and check whether or not they are doing everything correctly. Because sometimes you can just hear, by hearing how it should sound, that your version doesn't quite sound like that. So you can then look to that little area, spend time really working all the notes out or double checking the rhythms to see what it is that you're doing wrong. Now, another reason as to why I think that these tutorials on YouTube are not helpful, and why it is that they're not actually teaching you how to play the piano as such, or giving you the knowledge of what it is that you're doing to then take as a skill to expand on into something else, is that from what I can see from my research, and please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, because I probably am, the majority that I come across, you tend to have this kind of keyboard at the bottom of the screen, don't you? And then there's different combinations of, sometimes as the music is audibly playing, you'll see the keys light up in the correct order that you're supposed to be playing them with. Which hand are you supposed to play which of those lit up keys with, for a start? Others will go a little bit further, and we see this situation where we've got these descending coloured lines, and as that coloured line hits the top of the key at the bottom of the screen, that is our cue to press that particular key. And we can see that the length of that line varies, which usually relates to the length of the note, how long we kind of play it for and hold it for. It's an incredible amount of information, visual information, to take in one go. When researching this, I was really keen to try and find a channel that didn't just do this, to kind of prove me wrong and to prove to you guys that I'm not just being single-tracked and opinionated about this. And the closest that I found was one of Bohemian Rhapsody. It had all the things that the other videos I've just explained had, but it also had the sheet music at the top of the screen. I don't know what use that sheet music is going to be to anybody, because if you're using a YouTube tutorial video to learn a piece of music, it's because you can't read music. And what they're putting in front of you on this video is music far more complicated than anybody could read, unless they've kind of achieved a certain level of playing and they've spent time learning from the beginning, from scratch, from 1 note to 2 note to 3 and so on, to read the music, what use is that going to be? Not only that, but the amount of that music that's available is so short and changes so frequently that unless you're actually a proficient music reader, I'm not quite sure, other than for visual fanciness, what the actual point of that was. But anyway, so now let's forget about the fact that these videos also don't teach any piano technique. Like I mentioned a minute ago, they don't even really show us which hand to use for which part, which is essential when playing a piece of music. I mean, 9 times out of 10, you will find that the left hand will be playing what we call the accompaniment. So the right hand would play the melody, which is the bit that we tend to remember when we hear a piece of music, and we all know what a melody is. And that's played in the right hand, in the higher register of the piano, because it's easier to hear higher pitched sounds. Sometimes the melody does get put into the left hand, or perhaps a little counter melody might be put in there, but 9 times out of 10, it's in the right hand. So when we have sheet music, it will be written in such a way that it's very clear which hand plays which set of notes. And it's separated into to the right hand, the treble, the high notes, and the left hand, the bass, the low notes. So 90% of the notes that you will play in that lower part, which is very clear, is going to be the accompaniment. And obviously the same for the top part, for the treble notes in the right hand. And the reason as to why that's important is because in order for that melody to be heard over the accompaniment, which isn't just as simple as we're going to hear it better anyway because it's just the higher notes, is that we have to balance the way that we play our hands. We've got to play our left hand softer, and we've got to play our right hand a little bit louder. Every piano that you play, be it acoustic or digital, is different in the way that it feels to play and that the way it responds to what you're doing. Sometimes you'll get a piano that's got a really powerful bottom end on it, and you have to work extra hard in the treble in the right hand to get that melody to sing out. So the way that you balance your hands varies from instrument to instrument, and that is also the case as well for digital pianos. And yet there are technically videos online about piano technique, but it still doesn't have that situation where you're having somebody watching what you're doing and giving you feedback on you attempting that technique. It's a technique because it's difficult. It's something that you have to put time into to achieve. It's not something that somebody can just show you and you do it. It's like the habit thing again. But whilst trying to learn that habit or that technique, you're going to fall into bad habits because you haven't done it regularly enough at that point to just go straight into doing it correctly. And you need somebody else to notice that for you. You're not going to do that for yourself. It could be as simple as allowing your wrist to droop, which should be kind of level with the keys when you play. Now, by having your wrist level, it enables you to curl your fingers, which is how we need to have our fingers for a proper piano technique. But the second that your wrist droops, those fingers often tend to go flat. Now the problem with that is it then makes it very difficult for us to navigate the piano, because we're not going to just stay in this one position the entire time. There's a whole piano to use, and we don't just go like that. We do it by maybe passing our thumb under or a finger over, but without that space under our fingers, it's very difficult to do that accurately, quickly, fluently, and without kind of jerky movements in the volume that we're playing, which then just becomes not pleasant to listen to, or less pleasant so. So, you know, the reason why we drop our wrist, particularly when we're learning or in the early days, is because it's just one of those things where it just feels more relaxed. It feels more like a relief because it's like, oh, I've got to hold my wrist up. It can get a little bit tiring at first, doing something that you wouldn't ordinarily do in general life. We don't walk around with our arms like this in preparation for when we may want to play the piano. And another thing is that, for example, what technique doesn't show you on YouTube videos is that on most music notation for the piano, you will see a varying degree of numbers splattered about all the notes, and this is indicating which fingers we should use. Now that better helps us to utilize our fingers, because you see beginners, don't you? It's the stereotypical thing where they use one finger to play one note. Now you imagine trying to play a complicated piece of music fluently like that. It's not possible. So we first learn to hold a position and use each finger, and then maybe alternate them. But as I said a minute ago, we've got a whole piano to use, a depth of low notes and an incredible range of high notes, which when combined all together create some of the wonderful pieces that you love, that you want to learn how to play. So this fingering that's written on the music is written by somebody who has a particular size of hand and a particular span. And flexibility might be different as well, wrist flexibility. Now, that person has put down what he or she thinks would be the best fingering for the majority of people to use. But obviously, I'll tell you a story about hand size. I used to have piano lessons with Dame Fanny Waterman, an incredible piano teacher, and I learnt so much from her. But because of the level that she had got to, both as a performer in her early age and as a teacher, and the founder of the Leeds International Piano Competition, she knew pretty much every famous person there was to know in the musical world. And I remember going for a lesson one day, and she made me play this piece of music to somebody. This happened twice, actually. And I felt a little bit embarrassed because on one occasion I knew who this person was, and he was called Benjamin Frith, and he was the winner of the very first Leeds International Piano Competition. And because I had had bad technique up until this point, and she wanted to go right back to the beginning and sort all of this out, which was, as I've explained, even for me at that point, was taking quite a long time. So I remember having to play this piece called A Sad Story. Anyway, I kind of went off on a tangent there because that's not where I was going. It was the other person that I was made to play to that made me realise just how different people's hands were. And I played this same piece to this massive gentleman sat on the sofa, bearing in mind that I'm a mere kind of 5'4", if I'm being generous to myself. This guy was huge, and I remember thinking, who is that? And I played this piece of music, and he was very polite, and he said it was wonderful and all the rest of it, which it probably wasn't, because it was just a very, very simple piece that I was using to learn this particular technique. However, when he left, Fanny Waterman told me, "Ah dear, that was Rachmaninoff's great-great-grandson." Rachmaninoff was well known as a composer, but also as a pianist, for having huge hands and a huge hand span, and it then made sense why this guy was as big as he was. But when playing Rachmaninoff, this is where I find difficulties, because my stretch just isn't quite big enough, and I can't manage the fingering that's often written in these things. So I've needed in the past someone to go through it and help me navigate and find alternatives that will work, but allow me to still play the piece as the composer intended for it to be. So in effect, you could end up using a YouTube video to learn a piece of piano music and still come up short. No short jokes in the comments, thank you. Because I don't know if this is a silly thing to say, probably is, but surely if you could learn to be a knowledgeable pianist who can play lots of music and understand about expression and be able to spot all my own mistakes and correct them, da 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 da. If that was actually possible, would it not also be possible for me to learn how to be a doctor? online with no demonstration, no correction, no experience. And okay, it's a little bit more of an essential job to get right, being a doctor, I appreciate that. But you kind of know what I'm saying. We could say it about any field of work. If it generally was possible to do that purely on YouTube tutorial videos, they're a quick fix. Now, another thing is, I don't know about you, but if I'm starting a fitness journey, or in my musical journey, if I'm learning a piece of music, particularly in my younger years, I feel like the majority of us need accountability. And we need accountability from somebody who knows what they're talking about, or at least knows what it is that we're trying to achieve and how we're trying to achieve that. I think without goals being set for us, and there does come a point eventually when we're able to set our own goals, but that's never the case to start with. We need somebody who's knowledgeable and skillful in what it is that we're trying to learn or achieve or improve on to set those goals for us. I always found as well that knowing that I had somebody to play to every week, not in a pressure situation or a sense, not in a I've got to play well otherwise I'm going to have an awful week, but it encouraged me through the week to put that time into practice because I wanted to show the improvement that I could and had made through the practice that I was doing, which was based purely on what I'd been told to do, the goals that had been set, and the particular techniques and things that had been shown to work on the previous week. I mean, despite having taken all of my music exams, it was at a relatively young age, and then went on to taking diplomas. Part of that was because I wanted to continue bettering myself. The only reason that I stopped doing them was because it got to a point where they became so expensive to sit these exams that I had to kind of draw a line under them. But I still do this and still challenge myself now by forcing myself to play at least every 3 months a recital of music. Some of it may be music that I've done before that I just need to kind of brush up on, but I always make sure that I have one new piece of music to challenge myself to learn over that period of time. But up until my late 20s, for this same reason, I was still having piano lessons myself. It gave me weekly goals, and it gave me accountability, some more motivation to do the practice. Because not only that, I mean, don't we all love it when we do something good, or when we've improved on something and somebody tells you how well you've done or how good it is? Now, I mentioned earlier about sheet music. Why is it important to learn how to read it? I'll tell you why. The reason being is the most amount of pleasure that I get out of playing the piano or an instrument is because I can do exactly what you do at the first stage, and I think, I've heard a piece of music, I love that, or I love that song, I want to be able to play that. Sometimes a student comes to me with a piece of music that they've been learning, and I listen to it and I think, hey, I really like that, I'm going to get the music for that myself. But the ability to read music fluently, which at first does take some hard work, but doesn't anything that's worthwhile doing, has now become something that I can do without thinking. And it does mean that I can print off that piece of music and I can just play it. And the pleasure in being able to do that, and even more so when somebody comes up to me perhaps before an assembly and I've got about 5 minutes and somebody says, hey, we're doing this assembly on a particular theme. Could you play the theme tune to Wimbledon? Could you play the theme tune to this, or whatever it might be? And I quickly look it up on the iPad, find the sheet music, boom. And it's so nice to have that skill, if playing the piano is something that you want to do, to be able to learn something quickly that somebody else would get pleasure out of, rather than it just being one event in the future that might take you 6 months to learn one piece. I mean, that's absolutely fine, and that's all credit to you. If that is actually your only intention, then fandabidozi. Not many of you will be old enough to remember where that came from. But it also enables me to learn new pieces of music much, much faster. The longer it takes me to learn a piece of music, the more chance there is of me getting bored and giving up on it, which is what I see so often as a teacher, is if you don't put that work in to learn how to read that music, there comes a point where you are using more of the keyboard and playing things more difficult when you can't just do it by ear, or you can't just follow the note patterns, or just follow a YouTube tutorial video. So you learn how to read music, guys. It's the only way. I mean, that is just one opinion in this video. I often say this to students, and it is true. If I had to spend hours and hours copying somebody else play a piece of music in order to learn it, and then having to memorize it, and then retain that in my memory for however long I want to be able to play that piece of music, I'd have given up playing the piano years ago. Whereas I can play a piece of music now, and I could put that sheet music in front of me, having not played it for 40 years, and still be able to play it and not rely on having memorized the YouTube video from 40 years ago. And just to finish on this whole kind of music reading situation, this is the whole reason why it's part of music examinations. It is a recognised and important skill when it comes to playing an instrument. So, this has gone on way longer than I thought, so I apologise for that. Thank you if you have stayed the entirety of this video. Well done. If you can stick this video, you might as well go and learn how to read sheet music, right? So, the verdict. Yes, YouTube videos and tutorials has its place. It's a useful resource, and there are ways that we can use it to complement traditional human teaching. But I don't think it's got the ability to teach you the skills and give you the knowledge necessary to actually be able to play the piano beyond creating a piece of art using paint by numbers. And as I've mentioned a couple of times already, it can be really, really super useful if your only intention is to learn one piece of music for a special occasion, and I don't know, perhaps you're limited to time when you learn things better from memory. I particularly like it for discovering new pieces, because sometimes you can type in something really vague, can't you, and just type in, and this is often how I actually do find new pieces. I might write virtuosic film piano arrangements, and then you come up with people like Jared Radnick. If you've not heard some of his stuff, go and check it out, it's incredible. If you go down my videos a very long way, or just go into the playlist, into the piano section, it should be easy to find. You'll see that I did one of his arrangements of Pirates of the Caribbean during lockdown with a friend of mine, and we were actually dressed as pirates, playing in the park, 2 meters apart. But if we just sum it up by using my own channel as the example, now, with absolutely no musical knowledge whatsoever, somebody could learn a piece of music. It would probably take hours and hours, depending on how difficult it was, obviously. I do notice that on some of these tutorial videos that they actually change the keys of a lot of these pieces of music to make it easier. But then again, the emotion is often written in a particular key because of the resonance of the different sounds, and it's just not the same. But versus that work I did at the early stage to get myself to the point where I am now. Now, there was a point where I'd recorded 75 YouTube videos in a row as a challenge. The majority of them are piano. And I would say probably about 90% of those videos is you seeing me record a piece of music that I've never seen before, so purely sight read, and they're a first take. It's the only time that I've ever played that piece of music. And I probably never will again. But they were lovely pieces of music. Anyway, thanks for watching. I really appreciate a like. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments, a subscribe, share it with people that you know, and even if they're not interested in the piano, share it with them anyway and just tell them to leave it playing on in the background, because the watch time would be really helpful for me. I understand that these are just my opinions, not how everybody's gonna feel about it, but that was the whole point of the video, just to let you know what it is that I think and feel about these things. It just comes from my experience as a player for almost 40 years and as a teacher for just over 30 years. So I hope you enjoyed it, hope you took something from this, and I'll see you next time.